Okay, so calling to an order Clayton City Council meeting for Tuesday, May 21, 2019. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. If everyone could please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll move on to item 3, which is our consent calendar, and we do have one correction here for item 3A. Does anybody want to pull any item? Is there any comment, or do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 4, which is recognitions and presentation. We have none for tonight. Item 5A is our reports, and I believe we have a report from our Planning Commission Chair, Bassam. Al-Twal, please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councils. On Tuesday, May 14th, the Planning Commission met. Two members of the Planning Commission were absent, Mr. Glover and Mr. Shapiro. They had excuses, I think, out of the country. We had only one item on our agenda. It was item ZOA0319. It's the ordinance for extending the town center parking waiver. It's an item that repeats every 3 years and relates to the waiver of the parking fees in the town center. It was discussed and it was approved by a vote of 3-0. And that is all for the Planning Commission report.
Great. Any questions? Great. Thank you very much.
All right, have a great night.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
We don't have a Trails and Landscaping Committee meeting, which leads us to a city manager, and I believe our city manager is sick tonight, so we have our assistant city manager.
Yes, thank you, Council. Mr. Napper is out ill. He's got that terrible cold that a lot of people have been having this last several weeks. I do want to announce that we have Kevin Mizuno here, our finance manager, this evening to do the budget presentation. He's here with very little sleep. His baby was born at 1 a.m. this morning, so he welcomes a new daughter to the world at 7 pounds 3 ounces.
Great, thank you. And we'll move on then to city council reports. We'll start with Mr. Diaz, please.
Thank you. Make sure the microphone is on. It is. The green light. Had a couple of things happen between the last city council meeting and today. On the Friday the 10th, we had the East Bay Regional Communications Authority meeting, where this is where members from both Contra Costa County and
Alameda.
county is this one?
Alameda.
Anyway, from Alameda. Anyway, and we oversee the communications system that is used by all of the regional first responders, fire department, police department, and whatever. We coordinate making sure that they have adequate frequency space and that, and we approve some, pardon me, some new work with Motorola that oversees all of that. Later that evening, pardon me, I toured the Oakland Mormon Temple, which was very interesting. After June 15th, I believe, then it'll be closed off for public touring, but there is some areas that non-participation members will be able to tour. It was very interesting. They did an excellent job on refurbishing. On the 11th, we had a concert in the Grove with Boston Rocks. Then on Saturday the 18th, the Travis Credit Union had its annual free community shred day, which is always a well-received event, where this time they added not only doing shredding of bulk mail and paperwork and all that, but they also did recycling of some e-waste. So they're really stepping up to do the community work and continue to be a great community partner in Clayton. On the 20th, yesterday, we had the committee meeting for the barbecue, which is coming up on July the 13th. And that's going to be another big event where we will have both professional competitors and also what they're characterized as backyard competitors. And last but not least, coming up this Saturday, another concert, Brick House, for those of you that remember the Commodores.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
Okay, since the last City Council meeting, I attended the Oktoberfest meeting. Oktoberfest is coming up on October 4, 5, 6. The 4th is the Friday night of the carnival. So we'll also be looking for a lot of volunteers for that, and the committee is working very hard to get the Oktoberfest going. It's quite an undertaking. The 11th, I was at the concert in the Grove, collecting money to keep the concerts going next year. Trying to beat Julie Pierce, but I lost by $37, but we'll have a rematch this week. I attended the Library Foundation meeting on the 15th, and the library is having its 25th anniversary next year. They're looking to secure 500 members for the Library Foundation, so I encourage everybody to go out and join the Library Foundation. You could do it for as little as $10. I'm a member, and it's well worth it to keep our library going. And also, they're looking for volunteers. I put some flyers out on the table on the way out for various positions at the library, so it's very important that people come out and volunteer to keep our library going. I attended also the E-Waste and Shred event for Travis Credit Union on the 18th. It was a great, well-attended event, and we got it in just enough time before the rain started. It was like 10 minutes after, and the rain came down, so it was great. And that is my report.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Pierce?
Thank you. Congratulations to the Mizuno family. Even number 3 is a very special treat, so congratulations to all of you. Yes, it's been a busy couple of weeks. Attended the Travis Credit Union Shred event. That was valuable in getting rid of a little bit of extra paper. Try to go paperless, but these days it's really hard. On the 9th of May, we had the Central County Transpac meeting, which is the 5 Central County cities and the county, and went over our projected budget for next year and a few other items that are on the agenda. Looking forward to the new expenditure plan being put together by the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. On the 10th, I had a joint Association Bay Area Governments and Metropolitan Transportation Commission joint meeting. We had an 8-hour legislative meeting to go over some, and I stress just some, of the legislation bills dealing with housing. It was a full 8 hours. We had a break for about 15 minutes for lunch and kept on rolling, but we made our recommendations to our full bodies, and I'll report on that in a minute. On the 11th, we had our first concert in the Grove for this season. It was Boston Rocks. It was very well attended for a first concert. They're generally a little lighter, but it was a great concert. On the 13th, the few of us who are on the committee held a 4th of July parade planning meeting. There are actually only 5 people on that committee, so we need all the volunteers we can get on the day of the event. Some of the jobs are as simple as crowd control, where you make sure that the people in your area don't run out into the street and get run over, and you make sure that people stand back and things like that. So it's pretty simple. Most of the jobs are easy. Some of them have a couple more hours that we'd like to get volunteers for, but if you'd like to volunteer, let me know. On the 15th, the mayor and I met with the new owner of Oakhurst, to talk about establishing a much better relationship and a more collaborative relationship between the Oakhurst Country Club and the rest of the community, and to try and build a better relationship than has existed in the past. So that was a good meeting. I met on the 15th also with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. We had 2 meetings that evening. The admin committee had a personnel evaluation of our executive director, followed by our regular meeting of the executive board. We had a presentation by the county bus operators and talked about some of the innovative things that our bus operators are doing, some more so than others. East County in particular is leading the way in innovation. County Connection is right behind them, and I would say AC Transit is sort of a distant third. The good news is our sales tax year over year is up 3.1%. That's not quite what the cost of living has gone up, so look to a pretty flat line projection on our income. We also got a legislative update and took an opposed position on SB 336, which requires operators in autonomous vehicles. This is a move by the labor folks in the bus industry to prevent having truly autonomous vehicles. Let's see, we also went over our transportation expenditure plan. We are beginning a process to put a new measure on the March 2020 ballot. So we are looking at some of the new projects we might add to that to augment the funds that we get from other sources. On the 16th, the East Bay Leadership Council Transportation Task Force held a meeting, and their guest was the new MTC ABAG Executive Director, Therese McMillan, who is bringing an entirely new flavor to that seat and a breath of fresh air, I might say, to all of regional governance. So that's really exciting. That evening, we had an Association of Bay Area Governments, Legislative and Government Affairs, Finance and Executive Board meetings. The legislation committee there, and I gave you the notes that I had for that part of the meeting. That only went on 4 hours that night with the 30-some members that we had there at various times during that meeting, and the positions that we took on various pieces of legislation. So I gave that to you as a handout. I think that's probably the simplest way. If anybody has any questions on it, you can let me know and I can go over it. But I think the positions that we took are consistent with those that were expressed by the Housing Legislative Working Group that met for the previous 5 weeks, members of our colleagues around the region. Next Saturday is another concert in the Grove, as Jim mentioned, Brick House, which has got a lot of Madonna and Lady Gaga, and you name it. There's a lot of great music there, 80s, 90s, and present. And I think that's all my report. So think about it.
Okay, so let's continue on. So I think we got through Vice Mayor Pierce's report, so I think we're at Council Member Juan.
Yeah, I don't have a report this period.
Okay, so just a couple items for me. As already mentioned, I did also meet with the Vice Mayor, with the Oakhurst General Manager on the May 15th. Held some office hours, including last Sunday. We'll hold some mayor's office hours again this Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. at City Hall. And then Vice Mayor Pierce and myself in the subcommittee for the search for the new city manager, we had some discussions regarding the 4 proposals we have for the search firms, and I think we are going to be interviewing a couple of the search firms in the upcoming days. And then not really city related, but had some other interesting meetings. Attended, for example, the ULI's Housing Summit on May 10th, and also had an opportunity to attend a breakfast event the following Friday for Senator Wiener, which was interesting because it was the day after SB 50 had turned into a 2-year bill. So it was very interesting to hear his direct perspective after his bill got turned into a 2-year bill.
Was he in a good mood?
He was not in a very good mood. He would have preferred it to be a 1-year bill, I believe, and it was not. So with that, we'll conclude our reports, and we'll move on to item 6, which is public comment on non-agenda items. And this is the opportunity when any member of the public can speak on any item that's not on today's agenda. I have 2 speaker cards, but if anyone else would like to speak, just fill out a card and we'll get you up here. Ms. Stanaway.
Oh, it's on. Great. Okay, Ann Stanaway, 1553 Haviland Place, Clayton, California. During the May 7 council meeting, immediately after closure of public comment, an unagendized defense of parking violations on Haviland Court was laid before the City Council. This matter was not listed on the agenda. We, the public, had no notice of it. Nevertheless, the mayor allowed city management a significant portion of the council meeting to ridicule my, quote, point of view, unquote, on the city's continuing neglect of public safety. This evening, I benched my objection to that abusive process. Tonight, I address misrepresentations entered into Clayton's public record through the city's presentation. 1. City management chose to present pictures of the wrong vehicle at the wrong location, pictured without time and date stamp. Compare pictures on page 1 of my package before you. 2. City management chose not to disclose the scope of the matter. 1. Westwood Property Owners Association CCR's ban member parking or storage of commercial vehicles within the PUD. 2. WPOA declares violations of law, violations of its CCR, subject to enforcement by Homeowners Association. 3. City of Clayton Home Occupation Permit 03-17 for 1504 Haviland Court prohibits on-site commercial parking. 4. No parking anytime signs are posted throughout the Westwood PUD citing city ordinance. Although my point of view was derided by city management, their unagendized presentation nevertheless admitted exactly what I have stated. Vehicle encroachment into roads like Haviland Court do constitute violations of the fire code, and these violations continue unabated. In practical terms, longer, not non-commercial vehicles owned by members of the Homeowners Association do have viable parking options. See page 2, figures 1 and 2. Figures 3 and 4 show longer parking bays adjoining Haviland Court. Parking violations on Haviland Court jeopardize the health and welfare of all the residents of the Westwood subdivision. See threat assessment on page 5. Traffic flow to and from Haviland Court impacts Westwood's only ingress and egress. Should any congestion occur at the critical intersection circled on the map, hundreds of people could be trapped and die in the resulting melee. Thank you.
Thank you. I have another speaker card for Brian Budell.
Good evening. I am here to once again beat the glyphosate drum based on a couple of other new developments. As you folks may have been paying attention, there has been yet another verdict that has come down, this time for $2 billion, yes, with a B, billion dollars. That is significant because, one, it is showing that these verdicts are going up, which, as a guy who defends these lawsuits, I'm frankly terrified of that prospect. But more importantly, what's going to happen is these lawsuits have primarily been targeted against the manufacturers right now. The problem is they get hit with a couple more $2 billion verdicts, they're going to go bankrupt. And the now 14,000 pending lawsuits will not go away. What will happen is the plaintiff's attorneys will start casting a wider net to include things like retailers and applicators like the city who have exposed. So this is something you got to pay attention to, folks. And I also want to bring to attention another observation that I made back on April 30th when I was running along Marsh Creek Road, when I meant to email this to you, but there's a photo here.
Can you speak to the microphone so we'll catch you?
Yeah. It's the sign that says herbicide application in progress. Now, I don't remember, it was about maybe a month or so ago, I was told that, well, we were assured that glyphosate was not being applied in walkways. Well, this sign is absolutely in a walkway. In fact, it's between two walkways, the public sidewalk and the public trail that goes up Marsh Creek just north of the nursery. It's not a median. Now, the explanation before was, well, in those areas we use something else. Well, if you're using something else, why are you using a warning sign? And more importantly, why aren't you using that stuff instead of glyphosate? Because trust me, somebody's going to raise that. Somebody's not telling the truth here. So that needs to be addressed. The good news in all this is whether you guys do anything or not, it might not make a difference because the state of California is now proposing to ban glyphosate within the state and is moving forward with that. The troubling part of that is, why are we waiting? Why are we waiting for the state to do something that we can protect our own citizens? And that sort of goes to an overreaching problem that I've noticed, and that's a lack of leadership by our city government here. When we were talking about the CASA amendment, what was it, a month ago, whenever it was, I timed it. You guys spent about 50 minutes talking about how we could best do like Danville did. Wouldn't it be better if Danville spent 50 minutes saying, we would really like to do like Clayton did? That's called leadership. That's what you guys need to demonstrate. And there's been a sore lack of leadership on this council for quite a long time, with the only glimmer of hope being Mr. Juan taking the bull by the horns, at least with respect to that issue. It's important to get in front of issues, not behind them. Otherwise you get run over. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Budell? Yes. So you mentioned that the state is considering a ban against glyphosate. In what regard?
I've just got the preliminary details, and I'm happy to look into that. I just found out about it, actually.
But is it against the sale of glyphosate in the state? Against what's
yeah, potentially. Yeah, my understanding is it might be the sale and use within California, because I know New York has a ban. Because if you notice on the Roundup ads that you see on TV, they talk about that little wand. If you look at the little writing in the bottom, it'll say not allowed in New York. Okay. So I mean, it is gaining momentum in certain jurisdictions, and I think right now there's a couple of other states that are thinking about it. But I'll look into that, and I'm happy to email anything that I've got. I'll email all you guys.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. And I don't have any other speaker cards for non-agenda items. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and that then moves us to our public hearings. We have one item, item 7A, which is to conduct a notice public hearing to consider the adoption of a resolution approving and imposing annual sewer service charges and rate increases on real properties within the city of Clayton, commencing fiscal year 2019-20 through fiscal year 2022-23 for the operation, treatment, maintenance, and repair of the municipal sewer system. And I believe we have a staff report from Mr. Ezel, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes, if I may, Mayor, I'd like to introduce Justin Ezel, who's the Public Works Director for the City of Concord. And the reason they're here tonight to do this presentation and the staff report is the City of Clayton's sewer pipes that connect into Concord's transmission pipes. So everything that's coming through and feeding onto Clayton Road sewer main, it connects into the Concord sewer main line, which continues to Central Sands. And the same thing with Oakhurst Boulevard, connects into Concord Boulevard. And then over around the elementary school, connects through the Pine Hollow Road lines, which also go out and feed into the Concord line. So basically, the trunk lines of Clayton tied to the trunk lines of Concord, which takes all of the effluent through Concord into the Central Sands treatment plant. So Mr. Ezel is here tonight to give you the report on the sewer fee charges changes.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. I'd also like to point out that here with me tonight is Pedro Garcia in the back here. He's our senior administrative analyst with the city and is very much involved in development of our rates and charges, and also is a person who is responsible for managing the levy of properties both within Concord and Clayton. And so he's here with me tonight. Thank you for having us here and allowing us to present this information to you. Your city manager already gave you sort of a broad brush overview of the collection system, but I'll dive into it a little bit more. As Laura mentioned, the city of Clayton owns its wastewater collection system. The collection system is a series of pipes and manholes that collects all of the waste that's flushed down into the system, and it's used to transport that waste for treatment and disposal. Your city contracts with the city of Concord for operation of your wastewater system. You've been contracting with the city of Concord since 1966, and the fees that the city of Clayton pays is through property assessments. It's the same charge that the city of Concord properties pay for sewer collection and disposal, and it goes on property tax bills. And again, it's the same charge that the city of Concord properties pay. So what do you get through the agreement with the city of Concord? As I mentioned, we operate and maintain that system for you. Operation consists of cleaning and televising the underground lines so that we can identify defects and go out and repair them. Also so that we can identify root issues, so that we can prevent clogs from occurring and overflows. We make repairs. We work with your city on long-term capital projects. We provide customer service. And as I mentioned, we assess the annual property levies. The city of Concord used to have a wastewater treatment facility, and we would treat all of our own waste along with city of Clayton's waste. Back in the 70s, that treatment plant was closed, and we contracted with Central Contra Costa Sanitary District, or Central San. So they treat and dispose all of the wastewater that's collected both in Clayton and Concord. We have an agreement with Central San, and the amount that we pay for treatment and disposal is based on the proportional share of wastewater that flows into their treatment plant. So they have a series of meters that meters all of the flow that goes into that treatment plant. There are also a series of meters that measure all of the flow that comes from both Concord and Clayton. And we pay a proportional share of the cost to operate the treatment plant. So, for example, if the treatment plant costs $100 million to operate, we send about 32 to 34% of the total flow to that treatment plant. So we pay $32 to $34 million of the $100 million to operate the treatment plant. Looking at where your dollar goes when it comes to the amount that you pay for your sewer services, 25 cents of every dollar of the operating expenditures is for us to go out and perform the services that we provide. Treatment and disposal of wastewater is extremely expensive, and so 75 cents of every dollar that we pay as property owners goes for treatment and disposal of our wastewater to Central San. A couple of years ago, Central San embarked on a 20-year vision for their treatment plant, and they laid out a series of capital projects. That treatment plant was built back in 1948, or it opened in 1948, and so it's a very old treatment plant. It's undergone a series of projects to rehabilitate it and bring it into the modern system that it is today, but it's still an old treatment plant, and it's still having to meet very strict regulatory compliance laws, and it's also having to bring in more infrastructure for capacity and other things. And so they laid out a 20-year plan. This is looking at the next 10 years of that plan. And you can see that over 10 years, there will be capital projects totaling $554 million for which both Concord and Clayton will benefit from. So this is not the full cost of what Concord and Clayton will pay. We'll pay a proportional share of that $554 million. So looking at that a little differently, over the next 10 years, our share of those costs will be $170 million. Now, these aren't these aren't year-over-year costs, these are cumulative costs. So if you look at the year 2023 there on that graph, you'll see that over the next 4 years, we will have paid $60 million to Central San for their capital improvement projects. We took that information that Central San provided to us for their comprehensive master plan. And we embarked on our own rate study. Pedro worked with a professional consulting firm that specializes in municipal finance. And we looked at not only Central Sands costs, but we looked at our own operation and maintenance needs, the capital improvement needs, again, Central Sands costs, and then we also looked at ensuring that we have adequate sewer enterprise reserves. We completed our study and we took the information to our Infrastructure and Franchise Committee, and we looked at several different rate scenarios. And the rate scenario that our Infrastructure Franchise Committee and staff both recommended to our City Council were $45 per year rate increases for the next 4 years. We took that information to our City Council and we held a public hearing on May 7th, and our City Council concurred with that committee and staff recommendation. And so tonight we're proposing to you $45 per year rate increases for the next 4 years. The first year would be $637 per year in fiscal year 1920, followed by $682 in fiscal year 21, $727 per year in fiscal year 22, and $772 per year in fiscal year 23. The purpose of this slide, Council, and I'd like to draw your attention to it because I think it's important. It's number 13 of your packet. The purpose of this slide is to compare our future operating costs to our current year costs. And so as you're looking at this graph, I'm not showing you how much the cost will increase over year by year. This is how much our cost will be as compared to our current fiscal year. For example, in fiscal year 20, our cost will increase by 3%. And so when you compare fiscal year 20's cost to this current fiscal year, it'll be $141,000 more for us to operate. Looking out to fiscal year 23, you see that our costs increase by 3% every year. And so 4 years from now, it'll be almost $600,000 more per year to operate than it does cost us this fiscal year. Now I want to put Central Sand cost increases in here. Again, I think this is important to look at. And again, treatment and disposal of wastewater is very expensive. You see that next year their costs go up by 15%, and 4 years out, the cost that we're paying to Central Sand is 61% more than it is this current fiscal year. As I mentioned, our Infrastructure and Franchise Committee and staff looked at a series of different rate proposals. The proposal that we have here tonight is shown on this graph by comparing the amount of revenue that we will bring in to our costs. And you can see by the green horizontal line that in the early years, we bring in more revenue than our costs, and that's for 2 specific reasons. One reason is to ensure that we have adequate reserves to help us offset any unforeseen emergencies or unplanned capital repairs that are needed. The second important reason is to smooth out rates in future years. As I mentioned, we looked at several different rate scenarios. We attempted to keep our rates much lower in the early years so that they would be closely aligned with our expenses. The problem with that was that in fiscal year 22, we were seeing triple-digit rate increases in order to pay for our costs. So we were unable to find a good rate that kept rates low in the early years without this tremendous spike in the out years. And so again, that's how we came up with the proposal of $45 per year for the next 4 years. This slide compares both our current fiscal year sewer levy costs to our neighboring agencies, along with our proposed levy for next fiscal year to our neighboring agencies' current sewer costs. And I want to point out that you don't see some of our very close neighbors on this chart, Walnut Creek, Martinez, Pleasant Hill. And the reason for that is because Central Sand has a large service area which covers service for those agencies. And so they are on this graph, but they're under the Central Sand rates up there. Also, one thing that I'd like to point out is that there you see some red shaded areas on some of those horizontal bars. That's because there are some agencies that collect ad valorem tax and they use it to offset their sewer costs. So Central Sand, for example, they collect ad valorem taxes and they use it for operation of their sewer system. And so it factors into their complete rate. So what I want to point out on this chart is that increasing our rate by $45 per year next fiscal year will still keep us fairly low when compared to our neighboring agencies. And again, just to remind council that that's comparing our neighboring agencies' rates this fiscal year. It doesn't take into account any rate increases that they're considering right now for next fiscal year. And so I want to just summarize all the work that has occurred to date. Central Sand embarked on their 20-year master plan. They laid out a vision for the treatment plant. City of Concord took that information. We completed our own rate study so that we could develop rates to keep up with the work that Central Sand is doing and to cover our own operational costs. We took that information to council committee and then to our full city council. And we conducted our own public hearing on May 7th. Council concurred with those rate increases and they're moving forward. The city of Clayton completed its own Proposition 218 noticing requirement. And what that is sending a letter to all the property owners affected by the sewer rate increase within your city. About 4,000 notices were sent out to property owners within your city. We tallied the number of protest letters to determine whether or not there was a greater than 50% majority protest for the proposed rate increase. To date, I believe that we've received 2 letters which are benched for you, council. To reach a majority protest, you would need 2,000 or so protest letters to come in. Again, you received 2. And tonight you're conducting your public hearing. And so that I'd like to close with the recommendation from staff, which is to open the public hearing, receive public testimony, and to adopt the resolution that's before you tonight.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure the council may have a couple questions. Let me start with a couple. On page 14 of your slide presentation, there you mentioned the operational costs. Are these purely operational, or do they also include the capital improvement?
They're
expensive?
purely the operational costs.
So so some of them jump around quite a bit. Like, for example, if you look at the 2021-2, that's almost $10 million versus the prior year, which is only 2.6. What's the huge variability? Or is that that's a cost increase, actually?
That's
But nevertheless, there's some jumps around there.
Yeah. So if you look at the Central Sand operating costs for fiscal year 21, you see that the number is lower than the prior fiscal year. And again, what this is, it's comparing the total cost to operate in that year compared to the current year. Thank you. Apologize to the members of the audience who aren't seeing this information. So you see that in fiscal year 21, the operating cost for Central Sand, the number is lower than the prior fiscal year. And like I mentioned, what that is comparing is the cost of that year, which are over and above our current fiscal year. Central Sand in that year, they spend less capital dollars that fiscal year than the prior fiscal year. So it's actually less expensive for them to operate in fiscal year 21 than fiscal year 20. So the capital improvement plan that they have laid out, they have a number of different projects identified for different years. The projects that they've identified for fiscal 21 cost less than they do the prior year.
Okay. And then can you explain what the majority protest process is? So is that we're looking to see if, so I did see this notice was in our package as well, and I do recall receiving it in the mail as well as a resident, but so are we looking to see, are we required to see if at least 50% of the households would protest it? And then if they did, what would happen?
Well, according to Proposition 218, then we would not be able to move forward with the rate increase if there was a majority protest.
So it's a requirement of us to
That's correct.
ask for those, okay. And then one other question from me, and I'm sure the other council members may have questions too, but so the rate is always per single family residence, and I think that's how typically these work. But so the size of the home doesn't impact the rate, whether it's by square footage or number of bedrooms.
That's correct.
And that's typical, I assume.
That's correct.
Okay.
Different agencies will sometimes attempt to provide a different rate for high-density housing for homes with multiple dwelling units. Though the way that we've calculated our rates is in accordance with Proposition 218. Again, we work with a professional consulting firm that does this. And they've identified a set of rates that are equitable for all customer classes, both residential homes and commercial properties. And again, it's a requirement of Proposition 218 to have equitable rates, and we've identified those.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have questions of staff?
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Councilman Warren.
I'm going to jump around a little bit, if you don't mind. Kind of a follow-up to your question on slide 14. I think you asked if these were just operational costs or these included CIP, and you indicated these were just operational costs, but then you mentioned CIP projects. I must be misinterpreting something. Could you clarify?
Yeah. So what this graph is showing here are the City of Concord, Clayton's own operating costs. And separated out from that are the operating costs of Central San. And so if you combine the two, then you see our total cost for operating. But I wanted to show the difference between how costs are increasing over time as a result of the work that City of Concord is doing and our own cost of living increases that are projected for salaries and benefits for employees and so on. And so I wanted to show the difference between how costs will increase over time as a result of our own operations and how costs increase over time as a result of Central San's operations.
Okay. I guess, to clarify, it looks like in FY20, operating costs at Central San is going up $3.5 million. In FY21, they're going to go down $1 million-ish, right? FY22, they're going to go up another $8 million from the prior year. So that does seem kind of spiky. What is that based on?
Again, it's the capital projects that they've identified, and so they laid out a 20-year plan for capital projects, and each year they have a different set of projects that they'll be addressing. They might be, and I'll just throw out some examples. They might need to replace a digester at the treatment plant, and they'll do that in fiscal year 20. And again, I have no idea what projects they might be doing in 20. These are examples. So they might be replacing a digester in 20. They might instead in 2021 do a much smaller project that will cost less. And then in fiscal year 2022, they might replace 2 digesters and some piping. And so again, the projects that they have identified over time, they cost less or more different years depending on which projects they're completing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just seems like that's more capital cost than operational. I think that's what I was getting at.
I understood, I'm sorry. Now I got
It
you.
indicates that this is just operating costs, but I think it's not just operating costs, right?
It's part of our operating cost, and so if you were to look at the City of Concord's budget and you look at operating expenditures, the central sand costs are rolled into our own operating costs, and forgive me, that's why I've called them operating costs, but you're right, they are not operating costs for central sand, that's their
yeah.
capital improvement project.
That
So
part
forgive me
was-
for the confusion there.
Makes more sense.
Okay, yeah. Otherwise, it seemed kind of strange. Okay. Are you aware of what the rate history is for some immediate past period? Because it looks like we're currently around, the proposal is a 45 increase to 637. So is there a history of going backwards that shows what the rates were in prior years? Do we have that available?
I'll go by memory here. So 4 years ago, we did a similar study, and we increased rates over a 4-year period. And I believe that we had 2 years of $45 rate increases and 2 years of $50 rate increases. Again, going by memory.
Okay.
We had 4 years ago, we had projected out 10 years to see what our rate increases might look like, and we had projected that we would be implementing $50 per year rate increases instead of $45 per year rate increases. So things have changed a little bit. Central Sands capital improvement projects have changed a little bit, but it's been fairly consistent, $45, $50.
Okay. So are you aware what the percent of flow is from that is sent to Central Sand through Concord? What percent is from Concord proper, or what percent is from Clayton of the total?
The only way to identify that currently is to do theoretical models based on potential flows from single-family homes and use a calculation to come up with that. We don't have meters installed between our city boundaries to measure that flow. So the answer is no, we don't. We would have to install meters or come up with a calculation, and otherwise we don't know what the flow is, no.
Okay.
May I pose a question?
We'll open up for public hearing in a moment. Yeah, we'll open up. You'll have a moment, yeah.
And then I guess are you aware of what the total, like in gross terms, increase is that Central Sand is, what the amount is? Because early in the presentation you mentioned that the combination of Concord Clayton is like 30, did you say 32?
32 to 34%.
32%. So is it 32% of what is the total?
I'm sorry, the amount of flow, like
No, in
100 million
dollars.
gallons?
In dollars, if we represent, I think early in the presentation it indicated that the fees that are charged are based on a proportionate share, and our share is 32%. So
Right.
My question is, if you were to calculate in gross terms, what is the 32% of?
Well, I have information here tonight regarding their capital improvement program for projects which benefit, again, Concord and Clayton, because not all of their capital projects benefit our cities. And so their capital improvement project is much larger than the numbers that you saw tonight. The numbers that you saw tonight are only for projects which provide some benefit to both Concord and Clayton. And so I have the totals here for their capital improvement projects. But the cost to operate their treatment plant outside of the capital improvement projects, I don't have those numbers here tonight.
Okay. It seems pretty consistent with our past practice. My questions are all aimed towards the idea that if we don't know the total proportion and the increase in fee appears to be peanut buttered across, then just assessing the reasonableness of a flat rate increase when we don't know the proportionate share. So that's kind of where I'm going. And I don't It doesn't seem like it's very different than what we've done in the past, but those are just the questions about reasonableness is what I was interested in. So.
Yeah, I can say, council member, that Central San has worked really well with us and provided us all of their numbers. I do apologize, I don't have the backup here tonight with me. But for a number of months, we've been working closely with Central San. They've provided us with all of their financials. We've taken that information, we've given it to our consulting firm. And so we do have the information, and we're happy to share it with your agency if you'd like to see that.
Okay, that's the.
Okay.
I'm good.
Any other questions?
I guess my question is, who is it that Central San reports to? How do they get their money approved?
They have a board that operates much like this council, and so they have folks who are elected to that board by the agencies which they serve. Now, our council have asked a very similar question, a slightly different way, which is why are we not sitting on that board? And the reason for that is because we are not included in their service area. We're a customer, both Clayton and Concord are a customer of Central Sands, but we are not part of their service area, and so we are not able to elect anyone to that board.
And then how is it fair and equitable then for a smaller home, one bathroom home, especially in the day and age when we're talking about higher density housing and making things more affordable? How is that equitable that a smaller home pays the same as a 5-bedroom home with many bathrooms? How is that from a layperson's perspective? I need to know that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's very similar to how water rates are assessed. The real costs are in the infrastructure, getting service to those homes. Whether it's to supply water or to take waste away, it's that infrastructure that's needed to make that happen. And so that's how we determine those to be equitable.
Okay, and then one final question. It seems to me, and I could be wrong, that once the City Council of Concord makes a determination to go with this rate increase, that we don't have much of a choice. Is that correct? Because we're tied together?
Well, I'll be frank, it's not so much what the City Council of Concord decides, it's more so the agreement that our two agencies have with one another. What that agreement says is that properties in Clayton will pay the same amount as properties in Concord. And so really it's that binding agreement that we have that I think is more of interest to you than what the City of Concord does.
That's all. Thank you.
Great. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, I think just a couple of things. And while we have to hold here in Clayton a Prop 218 vote, Central San doesn't have to have any vote. They are unrestricted in their ability to raise prices. Being a special district, they don't go by the same rules as the rest of us, correct?
Well, it's, I attempted to keep my presentation fairly short, but there's a lot of information I could share with you. One piece is that Central San did go through the same exact process where they sent out Proposition 218 notices to all the properties for which they serve. They had their own public hearing in April. They did pass us rate increases. The proposed rate that you see up 2/3 or so up the way on that chart there is the rate that they adopted for next fiscal year. And so they did hold their own rate hearing just like this one.
Okay. Who are their what is their service area? Not their members that pay to buy in, but what is their physical service area?
The service area goes out to East County and goes all the way down to South County. I don't remember all of the different agencies for which they serve, but it's a very large area.
Well, and you mentioned that Walnut Creek and Lafayette and some of the others are not on that list because they are part of Central San's core membership area.
Yeah, if you'd like to know, your city attorney here has pulled up a map for me. They serve Clayton, Concord. Concord is included in this area for some reason. I'm not exactly sure if this is.
I have a feeling that may be who
Customers.
I think
pays
we're
where
looking
the
at the different
customers
map,
come
yeah.
from, but maybe not the service area. It's not that critical. I was just curious more than anything. So as a special district, they have far more freedom than we do about setting prices. So, but this does seem like over 12 years or so, we're going to more than double our original fee. So I guess the concern is, when do you stop building? It's a necessary service, there's no question. And we're not in a position to have our own. So you're sort of caught over a barrel here with what to do. But a question you might be able to ask, because of the information that was mailed out and the chart that indicates the differences between sizes of homes and commercial, I'm not sure it's real clear to everyone how the commercial rates are set. And it's by 100 cubic feet. Is that what I'm understanding here?
That's correct. So
it looks way less. It looks like, a 1% deal. Can you tell me what an average business would pay?
the minimum annual fee that a business would pay is the same as a single-family home.
Okay.
And so what happens is that for every water unit that is used above 100 units of water, they are charged that smaller fee. So let me pull up the information here. So if you're a business and you use 100 units of water, for next fiscal year, if these rates are adopted, you would pay $637, just like a single-family home would. If you used 101 units of water, you would pay $637 plus $5.63 for that additional unit of water. So for every unit of water that you use above 100 units, you're paying $5.63 per unit. And again, that goes towards the treatment and disposal of the waste.
Okay, so a small business is going to pay the same as the average single-family home is going to pay. And depending on their use of water, they could pay double, triple,
That's correct.
even more, depending on what kind of a business it is.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So I think we're done with.
I had
Go
one
ahead.
other question. Slide 14 is kind of sticking out to me. If we're proposing rate increases over the next 4 years of 7, 6, 6, it's a declining percent increase. It's like starts at 7 and goes down to 5.8 in year 4 at 45 flat, right? So how is it sustainable to have rate increases of 7% or less when we're having increases in operating costs of 15 up to 60? I mean, it seems like something is that doesn't really pencil out over the long term. So I guess my question is more along the lines of, along the line of, like, are we expecting to see much larger increases in the future to support that? Or I don't know how that. I guess there's not enough detail for me to really determine if that works. So.
Again, I'd like to draw your attention to slide 15, if I may. You see in the early years that we actually collect more revenue than our expenses. And again, that additional revenue goes into our reserves. And it also is used to smooth out the rate increases of future years to avoid spikes, like you mentioned. We worked very hard to make sure that we make it as easy as we can for our property owners. So we didn't want to have lower rate increases in the early years and then much larger rate increases in the out years. And so we did look out further, council member. We did look out 10 years from now. And what we are seeing are $45 rate increases for the next 10 years. So to your point, yes, operational costs are going to continue to rise. Unfortunately, so will our revenues need to rise. but the way it's looking is that they won't need to rise any more than $45 per year for the next 10 years.
So that's the expectation. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Is there a target for the reserves? What's the target for the reserves?
The industry standard is anywhere from 25 to 35%. And so those are the targets that we've been trying to hit, which is right in the middle, is right around 30% is what we'd like to hit.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, but it's kind of a little bit unrelated, but you may know the answer since we're talking about sewer. Do you know if they collect actual data from the sewer that gets passed? So I know, for example, a lot of European cities, actually all the sewer that goes through their system, they measure, for example, the levels of illegal or legal drugs, and they know exactly which cities have whatever drug uses or something like. Do they, or any kind of hazardous waste? Do you know if they collect any kind of data from the sewer that goes through?
I don't know that question.
Yes.
Wastewater does.
Sorry, Assistant to the City Manager, Laura Hoffmeister. I've gone on the tour over at the treatment plant, and what they informed us of is that they do have bulk data that they often put out to the community about not flushing drugs or needles down the toilets,
Right.
how much plastics and other things that they do collect in the filtration system, but they're not able to identify whether it's coming from Danville or Walnut Creek or Clayton or Concord, because it's all put into the anaerobic digesters in the filtration system in that first level of screening, and that's where most of that's taken out, and then the second and third level. So they do have quantities measured in tons, basically, that they offload to either household hazardous waste disposal areas, depending on what the material is, or whether it goes to the dump.
But it's all
Commingled together as one large quantity.
Yeah, because I know in Europe, a lot of the cities do that, and then you can get fairly accurate figures as to which cities rank in those kind of things. So anyway, okay, let's open up for public hearing. I do have a couple speaker cards, and if anyone else would like to speak, just fill out a speaker card. Dennis Wheel.
Thank you. Dennis Wheel, 1543 O'Hara Court. I've lived in Clayton for 17 years now. The last 2 years, I'm a senior citizen now and have been for a while, and downsized. So I downsized from a 4-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom house, and 3 baths to 2 baths. And my concern is not that there is a proposed price increase, but that there's no allocation to size of house or square footage of the house or number of bathrooms. And we're being, unfortunately, I think, put at disadvantage. I downsized for a specific reason of cutting costs, because I have a fixed income now in retirement, and downsizing was one way to afford to stay in Clayton. But with this proposal, it's making it difficult now to maintain a budget, knowing that the size of the sewer service charge could increase and take away from other needs of my disposable income. So although I understand that there needs to be improvements to the infrastructure and improvements in the sewer lines, I don't think it's fair to assess a 2-bedroom house the same as you would a 6-bedroom house, or a 2-bath house with a 6-bathroom house. We're just not using the services that we're being charged for. It's something that I think there would be a more equitable way of assessing this to lower income people, senior citizens, people on fixed incomes, than the way it's been proposed. So I hope, and by the way, the report here shows that the average, I think, is $592. Well, I'm over $600 now on my real estate property tax bill that I just recently received. So this is not entirely accurate. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Joe Beatty?
Thank you. I'm Joe Beatty. I live at 110 Crow Place in Clayton. Just have a couple of basic questions. In fact, Mr. Ezel's presentation tonight was very opportune. I'm glad to hear. I learned more than I've known since I've been here. It would seem mathematically possible to compute the difference between a fixed rate sewer charge and one of proportional usage. Water bill, gas bill, electricity are all you pay by the amount you use. It's your monthly bill. But sewer is fixed. That's what I'm hearing anyway. That's a proposal. It would seem to me, I know that Oakhurst has roughly 1,500 property owners. 1,484 was the last number I got. But the county assessor can tell you that. So if you take the total number of property owners, residential property owners in Oakhurst, or all of Clayton for that matter, you can do the same thing for Clayton, and you do the math and run the total fixed fee for that total number, and then compare it to the water consumption, the water bill for the same properties, which the water department can tell you, and then do a comparison, you can see what the difference would be if you charged a proportional rate rather than a fixed rate. The rate's fairly low, but I would think that you'd want to do that before you locked in on a fixed fee. My guess would be, I'm retired also, have no more kids, the kids are gone, probably do one load of wash a week, be on toilet and gray washing machine, maybe do the wash once a week, and just consumption of water, I would think we're fairly low. And I don't know where we would stand in comparison with other properties in the city of Clayton or in Oakhurst for that matter. But I would think either from the county assessor or the water department, the basic math numbers are there. So I would suggest doing two sets of equations. One would be multiplying total number of residents, property owners who are going to pay the fixed rate and what that would be, the total dollar amount, and then compare that with a figure from the water department on what the total water bill is per month, because I would think the water bill equates closely to the sewer bill. I would think they'd have to be very closely related. So, and then compare those two figures to determine whether you want to go with a fixed rate versus proportional. As I said, all the other bills that a homeowner pays are all proportional. Your gas for heating or hot water, your water, your electricity are all done proportional. You pay on a meter. But when we get to sewer, it's not. There are no meters. But I would think that the way to do the meter would be the amount of water you use, which is metered because you pay the bill every month. So that would be my suggestion, that would before you reach a decision, you get the math to back up proportional comparison versus fixed. Just a basic question.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you for your presentation.
Thank you. I don't have any other speaker cards. Would anyone else like to address? Mr. Budell?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I just a few points. One, kind of following up with one thing that Jeff raised, is that it seems to me that this amount is a little arbitrary given that we don't know the flow. I mean, my understanding is it's all flowing through one pipe. It starts at our pipe, goes through Concord, but this rate that's being proposed is somewhat arbitrary given that we don't know what percentage of our waste is going to the treatment facility. I think that there should be some basis there before some rate is come up with. Additionally, I'd like to know what these operating costs are. Does that include the salaries of the people there? I mean, we're all familiar with how some utility companies work, PG&E being perhaps the most grandiose example in terms of inflated salaries and bonuses and so forth. And I'm not saying Central San is that, but I don't know that they're not. And that's something I think should be considered before we start talking about how significant operating costs are. And then to echo the sentiments of the speakers that came before me, I guess I'm arguing from a slightly different position because I live in a 4,100 square foot house with 3.5 bedrooms and 4 people. So I use a lot more water. My wife is doing laundry nearly every day, and I think it's absolutely unfair that the two gentlemen that spoke before me should be paying the same rates that I'm paying. I I should be paying more. I'll say that straight away. So I think these are all considerations. I too appreciate the presentation, but I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that need to be answered before taking action and just going along with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public hearing. And could I ask Mr. Ezell to, Mr. Beatty mentioned the whole proportional argument and how you tie that to the water consumption. Is that something that is done anywhere, or can you elaborate a little bit on that?
It's something that's beginning to occur more and more for water agencies. And it's mostly in outdoor landscape. What's created are called water budgets, where a water agency goes and assesses for each property that it serves how much landscape is being irrigated and what type of landscape, whether it's turf grass or shrubs or something else. And there is a calculation that's done, and it's based on weather data. And the water agency determines how much water that landscape needs, and it creates a water budget. And so if the user of water stays within that budget, it pays one rate. If it goes outside of the budget, it pays a different rate, and it's usually tiered. For sewer customers, it gets pretty complex. And again, going back to irrigation, you can't assume that all the water that goes to a property is for showers and laundry and toilets. There's a lot of irrigation that occurs. And so unless we are working in concert with a water agency that's creating water budgets, or we're doing it ourselves, it could get very complex and very messy. And potentially there could be legal challenges as well for trying to develop a rate structure similar to that.
Okay. And have you seen any other agency do any kind of differentiation based on unit types? I mean, I think you mentioned the multifamily, but other than that, like based on a number of bathrooms or bedrooms or occupants or?
I personally am not familiar with any rates that are done that way. I'm not saying that there are not. I'm not personally familiar with them.
Okay, perfect. Well, I close public hearing, so, but, yeah, let me reopen public hearing and.
I just came to not just came, 7 years ago. In South Carolina, I had the same issue. So I went to the water department and installed a meter just for my lawn irrigation, separately metered. No sewer fee for that because it was all on the ground. I've done the same thing here, and I got an answer back. It was rather costly. It was close to $1,000 for the meter and some other costs. But if you're going to be in a property 30 years or longer, that'll probably outlast me. I won't last that long. But at any rate, if you're a fairly young landowner or property owner, and you have a substantial amount of landscaping, it pays to do that. So there is a way to do it, and that's through separate meters for landscaping.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So with that, I'll close public hearing again, and we'll bring it back to the commission, council for discussion. Who would like to start?
Well,
certainly
I'm very concerned about the operating costs. I'm concerned about what seems to be an overwhelming increase over the next umpteen years, and how we're going to handle that. I don't really have an answer, but some of the public comment was very interesting to me, that there may be other ways to explore things, but as Vice Mayor Pierce said, we can't treat our own waste. So are we between a rock and a hard place?
Applying for a consideration of the proportional has been suggested. I don't know how you do it. That's up to the experts, but that's where I'm coming out on this.
Vice Mayor Pierce.
I'll jump in. We've actually had bigger increases over the last 4 years than is what is proposed here. It is starting to get cumulatively much larger, and depending on the capital infrastructure improvements that Central Sand plans on making after this projected bunch of improvements, it could potentially continue to go up even more. So, but barring any way of metering how much individual homes send through their individual sewer, or the city of Clayton does versus the total that goes through the pipes when it leaves Concord. You know, this is as fair as anything else, to make all single-family homes the same. We do the same thing for streetlights. We do the same thing for some of the others. We have a common good that is fed by having sewer available to our residents. You know, unless somebody wants to figure out a fair way of restructuring everything, I think this is what we gotta go with. And so with that, I would be prepared to make a motion to adopt the resolution with the CEQA finding its enactment as exempt or not a project pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21065, 14 California Regulations, Sections 15060C2, 15060C3, and 15378, and or 15061B3.
Before we get to that, though, there was a mention that there is an agreement that the households in Concord pay the same rates as the households in Clayton. I think you mentioned that in passing, and that's a long-standing agreement, if I recall.
That's correct.
66. It's been since inception, essentially.
Agreement established at that time, yes.
And could I make a point of clarification before you move forward with the proceedings? If you wanted to do a different rate structure, Concord is still going to charge us the same rate that the Concord residences are paying.
Based on that?
Based on that agreement. And so if you did a modified or lower rate, then you will still be paying the larger rate to Concord, and you would need to be making up the difference.
So somebody is going to be paying much more.
Meaning
That's the rock and the hard place.
You either peanut butter it or you tier it. Right?
Meaning the city would be paying the
difference.
difference.
Because you might have a 2-bedroom place that has an acre of lawn, theoretically. It's a gross exaggeration, but you could have, and because it all goes through 1 meter, you know, potentially, it's different.
Just a question, with the talk of ADUs, for instance, where does that come down? Does that then go through the main, are the people in the ADU going to pay the same as the main house, or?
Yeah, it goes through the same one.
Interesting. When we're talking about affordable housing coming here.
But it's not charged extra, because it goes through the 1 sewer connection.
They become somewhat free riders.
I see.
And I also wanted to clarify, this vote, in order to adopt this resolution, requires a 2/3 vote, so it will need 4 of you to approve the resolution.
And we still have.
Have we had a second?
No,
I'm sorry, I'm just.
I mean,
I don't think we have a choice, quite frankly.
I mean, in theory, what's the alternative?
I know,
There isn't
that's
one.
the question.
Right.
No, the public hearing is closed.
The alternative is if you don't pass this, resolution, the alternative is any difference or any increase
City
will
has to
need to
make
come
up.
out of the city's general fund, and you don't have the funds available pretty much in your general fund to make those payments over the period of time that's forecasted here, because this is for a 4-year basis.
And that agreement, that same agreement, is that in perpetuity, or?
Yes, it's until you can find an alternative way to obtain this sewer getting to Central Sand. So if the Clayton wanted to build its own conveyance pipe through Concord to the treatment plant, that would be an option.
Or we all get composting toilets, one or the other.
Or you could engage a mathematical wizard out there that could take a look at what the total cost is going through Concord and then come up with some sort of a magical formula that could be applied to 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, so forth houses in Clayton.
Any different rate structure is different than the agreement that was executed in 1966, and to do that, you would be able to do that theoretical calculation, enter into conversations with Concord to make amendments to that agreement to go to a different formula. But the time is not enough between now and this. It would be a conversation to have on a go-forward basis to explore and to maybe have further study session on this issue and bring Central Sands in to talk about a little bit more on the capital projects and what's going on their end as well, to help us understand the whole situation as it goes out into the future.
So there, to understand, or just for clarification, there's 3 pipes that we have that feed into the Concord pipes. Is that accurate?
There's at least 3.
At least 3.
Correct.
And those are never essentially, the flow is never measured at the connection points. Is that even a thing?
It's never been done that I know of. I know it take time and equipment to do it, and there's probably more than 3. I don't know the quantity. That would have to be looked at on the sewer maps to see, because Yolanda Circle goes out and it may sewer back into Concord through an easement between yards, because it's all gravity feeds, so it may go between property lines and not be at specific points that you could get to, say, at the main manhole on the street. You'd want to get to those points where they do connect, but some of it may connect through backyard areas or side yard areas from one community to another. And I will also point out that in our community, we also have a lot of homeowners that still have water wells. And they use wells for not only for irrigation, but also for potable sources inside their home. So you don't have homeowners that would have the ability to know what their water usage is, as was mentioned, by a site-by-site basis. I think Mr. Beatty's point about some of the areas he's talking about, I am familiar with some of the East Coast communities. They have their own water department and they have their own sewer department. And they have all of that information on one computerized database that allows them to create a different type of rate structure in their communities, so that whatever you're billed for water consumption use for the inside of the home is used to create a schedule for your sewer effluent discharge and use in the sewer system. And he's correct. They have 2 meters that they would install, one for the irrigation separate from the household water. They would take the household water measurement and calculate out what your sewer charges are per gallon, and they would do that, but that's all inclusive in a municipal operations, not a separate special district, which is what we have here with special databases that are separate by different governing bodies.
So let me break it down by dollars then. So if we don't approve the rate increase today, that means we, the city, have to come up with the difference. So let's say there are about 4,000 households in Clayton, not including the commercial users. $45 increase is $180,000 for the first year. That means $360,000 for the next year, $540,000 for the next, $720,000 for the fourth year. That's $1.8 million. So either we figure out, if we don't approve it, we're going to figure out a source for $1.8 million for the next 4 years.
That's correct, and if you recall from your budget item that's coming up on your agenda, I believe in the fiscal year, next fiscal year's budget for 1920 is proposed about a $36,000 to the good, an immediate balanced budget with not revenue surplus that would allow you to pay for the cost difference to Concord for the sewer, or Central Sands to the sewer.
Okay.
Well, the good news is if it continues at $45 per year, the percent increase will decline each year.
One way of looking at it.
That's a positive.
But with a $1.8 million cost figure over the next 4 years coming out of city budget, I don't think we have a choice. So is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
So it's been first and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye. No, excuse me, no.
Okay, so Councilmember Diaz opposed, but that does still pass with a vote of 4-1. Okay, thank you. So then we will move on to our action items. Item 8A is the consideration of the introduction and presentation of the proposed City of Clayton budget for fiscal year 2019-20 and the proposed capital improvement program CIP 5-year budget, and to set a date of Tuesday, June 4, 2019 for a public hearing to review and adopt the proposed city budget. And we have our finance manager here for a few more minutes, I believe, and then
Yes.
it may be bedtime soon.
And then I got to run back in and check in. So yes, thank you very much, Mayor Catalano. Due to a significant, intense personal issue that happened that I was kind of planning for at some point in early June, came a little earlier than we planned. Substantial efforts were made by staff. I have to commend staff and all of the department heads for their input. The city manager, Mr. Gary Napper, and our members of the city council budget subcommittee, Councilmember Juan and Councilmember Diaz, for all their time and input in meetings. So we did do a huge push to streamline this project, and luckily because of that, the entire proposed budget was included into the agenda that we're seeing tonight, and that was completed. But because of the issue that occurred, I actually wasn't even around Monday and Tuesday in the office. I could not be in the office. So in the slideshow, there are just, I think, 3 minor items that I identified that I didn't have an opportunity to change, and I'll point those out what the differences are. Luckily, we have a great staff, and our city clerk, along with assistant to the city manager, Laura Hoffmeister, were able to find the slide that I had completed already on Friday, and they did upload that, but I will point those items out. So I'll go ahead and open the slideshow here. So the goal of tonight's presentation is to kind of provide a summary of the very comprehensive 185-page budget that we have. This is supposed to be a high-level review, and I can respond to much more specific questions at the conclusion of the meeting when the City Council takes the matter for discussion. The budget subcommittee did meet prior to this meeting, and they did have the support of the figures that were presented by staff. The only significant change that I'm aware of that happened since the meeting, the City Council Budget Subcommittee meeting back in April, was the release of the CPI. We do use the Consumer Price Index from April to April to adjust certain expenditure and revenue line item forecasts. And we did not have that figure at the time of the meeting. We just used the prior year CPI, 1 year, April to April, which was, I believe, 3.22%. And for the actual CPI, it came out actually at 4.01%, which is the largest that I've seen since I've been at the city for a little over 5 years. So the city's budget is ultimately comprised of 27 different funds, so we are fairly complex even for a small entity, and a lot of that is because we have basic public services we have to provide, and on top of that we have several restricted use special revenue funds, a capital improvement program, and several fiduciary funds that we have to account for and budget for legally. I would like to point out that there's just a modest decrease from fiscal year 2018-19 to 19-20 for the total budget of about 0.52%. And that decrease is primarily explained by far lower appropriations in the Measure J fund following the completion of 2 very large street projects this year that were overall quite successful, which is the Keller Ridge Collector Street Rehab Project and the 2018 Neighborhood Street Rehab Project. Those were both budgeted for and then completed in fiscal year 2018-19. The one ending in June 30th of 2019. So this slide is kind of a summary of all fiscal year 2020 city revenues by fund, excluding the city's CIP fund and fiduciary funds, which are generally out of the scope of our operating and maintenance budget. They include a lot of debt service and non-recurring capital projects. So of this slice of the pie, the general fund and the landscape district make up a substantial portion, actually over 3/4 of operational revenues for the city, at 77.6% of total revenues. So the general fund being the largest of the revenue source, comprising 62.14%, that is largely composed of secured property taxes, which I will get into later about the makeup on that. Property tax in lieu of vehicle license fees from the state, which is still kind of a local secured tax, property tax. We just get that in lieu of the vehicle license fees we used to get. Sales and use taxes, and then franchise fees, which we'll get into in a little bit more in a later slide. Similarly, this pie chart shows an allocation of citywide expenditures by fund. And the order with the revenue it's consistent with the revenues with a few exceptions. And on this item, there's 2 that I did identify that were incorrect. That is Neighborhood Streetlight Fund appears twice. This one here, the 1.89, that's actually supposed to be a 1.44, and that's for the Grove Park. It's a very small percentage, but I did want to point out that it was different. And this is correct, the Neighborhood Streetlights Fund, but the percentage is actually 1.89%. And again, that was just, I wasn't around, I didn't have the time to make that correction prior to this, but those were just two minor changes here. So the largest expenditure share of the total budget is, again, following the revenues, is the general fund at 55.96%. So you will notice if you look at the prior years, the same pie chart in the prior year for fiscal year 18-19, the general fund was actually about 5% less than it is now, and it's not 5% higher this year because of an increase in expenditures. That 5% increase is positively correlated with a decrease in the Measure J fund. It drops from like 10% to 4.52%. So because we don't have as much reserves in the Measure J fund to do the street projects, since we finished those two projects this year, that proportion dropped substantially, which bumped up the general fund and the other funds as well. So the LMD, or Landscape Maintenance District, comprises about 17.82% of total citywide expenditures for the operational budget, which accounts for our city voter-approved Measure H in the restricted use special parcel tax fund, which is restricted for specified landscaping areas as well as trail maintenance purposes within the boundaries of the district. This slide provides a summary of like a hypothetical situation, just to put into context where our budgets have been in comparison with inflation in the Bay Area, particularly in the East Bay. So using fiscal year 2002 as a base, the red line, the higher one, shows what-if revenues with that baseline adjusted for the annual consumer price index published in April of each year. The blue line, in comparison, shows the actual adopted budgets for each of those fiscal years. And the baseline is somewhat arbitrary. That's when we originally started this study. We could have gone back to the 90s, but for purposes of just continuity, we just continue with that and we adjust it going forward. So ultimately what it shows is that for next year's budget, the inflationary shortfall, so the difference between our adopted general fund budget, revenues versus hypothetical inflationary revenues, is over $1 million at 1.011 million. So it just kind of supports that we're operating with very limited resources. We are not keeping pace with inflation, but overall the city is meeting the general demands of our citywide obligations, primarily being public safety, which comprises over 50% of our responsibilities as a municipal agency. The next two slides kind of provide a background of our two major sources of operating revenue in the general fund. So this is a pie chart that illustrates the distribution of the ad valorem secured property tax following the passage of Proposition 13 in 1978. And on average, which this little pie slice shows, that's the city share of the 1% ad valorem tax. So the city actually only gets 6.6 cents of every dollar in ad valorem secured property taxes. And that does make us a very low property tax city when you compare to many other agencies. For instance, City of Berkeley, not to point them out, they're in upwards of 44%, I think, for the ad valorem. So we are very low in comparison. And that's not something that we can change because it was included in the legislation at that time. This is a similar pie chart that kind of allocates the distribution of the 8.25% sales tax rate that members of the public pay when they make retail purchases. So in reality, of that 8.25%, we get 1% of the slice, which is the local Bradley Burns share, making us number 3 in line. And ultimately, when you break that out, that equates to the city receiving 12.1 cents for every sales tax dollar that they pay on a purchase in the city of Clayton, and that would go to the general fund to fund general obligations of the city. And that's not something we can change. That's part of state law, statute. The only way we could change that is the whole electorate of California were to change it for whatever reason, or if we were to pass a local measure to add something to that. But I think in past studies that have been done, and I think just a look at our community says that problem may not necessarily be the greatest idea because we don't have a large brick and mortar basis for that. So even adding another 1% may not do very much for the city. So we just leave it at status quo for sales taxes. This kind of provides a makeup of general fund revenues in the proposed budget for next fiscal year in order by size. And the total general fund revenue budget is $4,814,200. And the largest four shares of general fund revenues come from, they make up 63.8% of our revenues. So we are pretty concentrated in 4 areas, 2 of which are very, very similar. The highest is our property tax in lieu of vehicle license fees, or VLF, that I talked about previously. And that's basically the city, all of California local agencies getting a share of the state's secured property tax in this local area in lieu of the vehicle license fee that we used to get. But that's not anything we can change. That was a state mandate a few decades ago. Our proposed budget is relatively fiscally conservative, just because we don't necessarily know what's going to happen down the line, and we're proposing a 2% growth rate in this revenue line item over last year actuals. Similarly, the second largest item, revenue source in the general fund, is for secured property taxes at 20.9%, and we also projected a relatively conservative 2% growth rate over last year's. And 2% is actually the Prop 13 cap. So it doesn't take into consideration sales, like sales between, I guess, at arm length sales, but it still is a good minimum basis to start with, because we're not sure exactly what's going to happen. It could be less than 2%, but I would forecast that it will be higher than that. The third highest is for franchise fees, the largest of which come from PG&E, Comcast, and Republic Services for their right to operate their utilities using our right-of-way and our infrastructure. And that makes up about 11.2% of general fund revenues. And that we're basically flatlining at a growth rate of 0.9%. And a lot of that is because while some may be growing, we are observing that others, like the Comcast, is declining significantly, largely, which we discuss in detail in the budget message, is because people are moving from a cable-based platform to web stream services. Which just every local agency is experiencing the same type of decline. So that's why a 0.9% growth rate seems reasonable for that source. The fourth largest item is for sales and use tax. Using historical actuals and some information included in the very comprehensive state budget where they talk about sales taxes, we're actually projecting 4% growth over prior actuals, which that's higher than it has been in prior years, but it's still a conservative figure in the studies that I've done internally and discussions that I've had with professionals. And that doesn't incorporate anything with the Wayfair decision. Most cities, local agencies, when I reach out to colleagues around the area, are taking kind of a status quo approach to Wayfair. And what Wayfair is the new South Dakota versus Wayfair Supreme Court decision, which has concluded that if an entity has a substantial amount of sales online, then there is nexus, and a state does have the right to charge a use tax or a sales tax on those transactions. To determine what that would be in the city of Clayton, we'd have to hire a consultant, the cost might even exceed the amount of revenue that we're going to get, because it's number 4 on the list. So we're going to kind of we all agreed that a status quo approach to this would be conservative. We'll see what the real figures are in later years, and then we can work with actuals rather than pay a high upfront cost to figure out a number that may not even be favorable to the city. Would you like to, I think Councilmember, okay. Thank you. So the next slide is a distribution of general fund appropriations by department in order of size. And in total, this City of Clayton has 9 general fund departments. And the total proposed appropriations of the general fund are $4,774,450. And the order in size sometimes changes, but it is consistent this year in the proposed budget as it was in last year's proposed budget, which indicates that there's been no real reason, no new state mandates or no significant policy direction included in the budget to redirect general fund resources. The largest, like every year, is the police department. This year it's proposed to be make up 50.7% of total general fund appropriations. In the prior year, that was actually less than 50% at 49.4%, and we did, very in full disclosure, point out during last year's budget presentations that that was a non-recurring anomaly. A PD almost always makes up over 50%, but last year the Tier 1 side fund UAL or unfunded actuarial liability with CalPERS was paid off, fully amortized, which was good, so the city had savings, but it was ultimately non-recurring in nature, and as a gradual recapture of UAL, of course, the CalPERS is imposing on us for that. So there wasn't a full return of the savings that we had last year, but it is a gradual creep, just to pay off the general public safety unfunded actuarial liability. This is a 2-year comparison table of general fund appropriations that kind of gives you an idea of the change in general fund appropriations, but at the department level from last year to next year's proposed budget. And overall, there's a proposed increase of 4.08% in our balanced budget for next year, and that increase is largely explained by the recapture of those savings that we experienced, those non-recurring savings that we experienced in the police department last year with the payoff of that Tier 1 side fund liability, as well as it incorporates the labor agreement currently in place for our POA, Police Officers Association, which accounts for 11 of our 11 employees, so because we have 11 sworn officers. So, and that was a 4.5% COLA, cost of living adjustment for next year. There's nothing I should point out in this figure for next year's proposed appropriations for the miscellaneous group, which comprises the other half of employees. It assumes status quo, so no change, and that agreement actually expires on June 30th of 2019. It's my understanding that the council, along with the city manager and that group of their elected spokespeople, I should say, they're still under negotiations, but because nothing's been approved yet, generally our approach here is to not speculate and we just do status quo, and then the city council can look at the general fund excess that we budgeted for next year and some other factors and see if it's feasible. So this is kind of a nice picture of the proposed bottom line for the general fund next year. Are we better off or are we worse off? So ultimately, we are better off, and we are proposing a very modest general fund operational excess of basically revenues minus expenses to the good of $39,750. That results in a general fund estimated reserve balance of $5.56 million as of June 30th of 2020. And one thing to point out is that opening reserve balance of $5,524,695 is net of any earmarks of reserves that the City Council has previously approved for specific purposes, usually capital in nature or funding our insurance replacement fund or capital equipment replacement fund. So it's a more conservative, realistic figure. It's more of a cash position. And that figure is approximately 1.16 times the size of our proposed operating budget for next year. So if we didn't collect in a dime in revenues next year, at least we'd be able to operate entirely on reserves for a little over 1 year. So a lot of bigger agencies, that's not obtainable. I haven't read any studies to say why it's not or if it should be, but I know if I look around at all the bigger agencies, they're closer to 20% if they're lucky. And because we are a smaller agency with a very, as you saw, a non-diversified revenue portfolio, we depend on things that don't change very much. We have to be very careful because if there's a significant natural disaster, we may have to dip into this. So it generally, that's a good sign that it is above a ratio of 1. This provides a summary of the capital and other operational non-recurring projects in the landscape maintenance district. In total, there are 6 projects that are being proposed for next fiscal year in the landscape maintenance district that comprise about 24% of total proposed appropriations for that fund, which is a good sign, showing that reserves are being used for big projects that the community or the city council has directed staff complete. This list of 6 projects was reviewed and recommended by the City Council appointed Trails and Landscape Committee, which is a citizen committee that met on April 15th of this year. So in regards to the Downtown Planners Project, that's been a project that has been budgeted for and planned for the past several years. Staff did run into some technical issues with that project as far as-builts go, and also we had some turnover in a key position in maintenance, one that had been here for almost 2 decades, and then in 2017 the city also contracted a new city engineer versus from the previous engineer that we had for several decades, so it did ultimately result in some unfortunate setbacks to this project. However, the good news is the city engineer, who will be presenting later tonight, has completed the bid specs for this project, and it's expected to go out to bid in the next couple weeks. And hopefully, if people do bid on the project and it's within the ballpark of what's affordable, that project can be proposed to the city council, approved, and then executed finally next fiscal year. So the total of those projects cost is $363,157 in the restricted use L&D fund for next fiscal year. Similarly, when you look at the capital improvement program fund for the city, this slide summarizes all of the significant projects that the city has planned for next fiscal year. In total, there are 10 projects in the CIP for next year's budget, budgeted at a total of $2,993,371. This doesn't mean that there's only going to be 10 projects. There could be a redirection approved by staff or approved by the city council or recommended by the staff during the year, or there could be new projects that come into line out of urgency, but we're starting off with a population of 10 projects. Just to point out the 3 largest ones included in the CIP budget next year. The largest is the Pine Hall Road upgrade, which is it's a street rehab project for the city's entryway on Pine Hall Road. That's estimated to be a little over $1 million, which is going to be largely funded by a federal grant with Contra Costa Transportation Authority called OBAG 2, which we're budgeted to receive next year, as well as Measure J monies and the relatively new SB1 monies, or we call it RMRA in our budget, which is Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account monies, to supplement the regular gas tax that we previously received. The second largest capital project proposed for next year is the 2020 Neighborhood Street Repave project at approximately $599,000 next year. We do want to point out that that's actually a placeholder for right now. Our policy direction is always in the capital projects budget to plan to utilize any restricted street reserves that are available, whether that's Measure J, HUDA, or historical gas tax monies, or the new SB1 monies, because we've seen in the past that if a local agency doesn't use their reserves that are available, if the state hits a crunch, they may just take it. which is what happened to the redevelopment agency money that the city used to have for a lot of significant projects downtown, which is what the state did to California First Five commissions and other things. They just took half of the fund balance. So we always budget to utilize reserves. So that for right now is a placeholder. At some point next fiscal year, as with most fiscal years, the city engineer would present to the city council a list of streets based on a study that could be included in a package for a repave project. And generally that's based off of the lowest pavement condition index rating, or PCI rating, as published by the MTC, or Metropolitan Transportation Commission. The third largest project for next fiscal year is the El Molino Drive Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project at $510,000. And that is largely for the construction phase. We are budgeting, we're planning that the city will incur approximately $200,000 in that project this current fiscal year, which is largely for the planning and design portion of that project, which is to be funded by a reimbursement agreement with the city of Concord, which Mr. Eisel from Concord Sewer, or Public Works, discussed previously. We do have an agreement with Concord whereby the city of Concord administers the levy collection that's approved for city residents, and also we contract with Concord to maintain our collection system for sewage collection. And of course, the Central Sanitary District is the only big entity around that handles the treatment of sludge that's collected in that system. This, unfortunately, is the last item that I did identify, a slide that was not correct. But what I can point out is if you look at the budget on page 73, that is the graph that I did want to include on this page that inadvertently was not here. And ultimately what it's supposed to show is a historical trend of the city's Tier 1, so the Tier 1 groups for public safety and miscellaneous, the unfunded actuarial liabilities. We do have two other tiers. The budget message goes into detail about why those tiers were established, ultimately to save the city money, and also as a result of pension reform approved by the legislature as well as CalPERS. So tier 1s are basically the classic, the older employees that are the most expensive, that largely aren't here anymore, that have retired or went to another agency, but we still are on the hook for the accumulated unfunded actuarial liability. So on page 73 of the proposed budget, in the budget message, it shows the past 7 years of UALs published by CalPERS, which is the only years that are available when CalPERS actually started releasing that information for our plan that we have participate in, as well as a projection for the next 10 years. And the good news is that for the next 10 years, you gradually start to see a decline in the UAL. The bad news is it's gradual because we can't afford to pay it off all at once. Just like any debts, they're largely paid over on a debt service schedule over time. And the other pain of that is it is going down because CalPERS is imposing these fixed dollar UAL billings each fiscal year on us, which are discussed more greatly in the next slide. So the two positive things to point out is for the two most recent fiscal years where information is available. So for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 2017 and June 30th of 2018, the returns by the CalPERS costs, the pension fund, were higher than their long-term assumed discount rate of 11.2% and also 8.6%. So their previous discount rate was 7.5%. So that's good news. But of course, when you have a gain like that, they don't book the gain all in 1 year. It's smoothed over a long 20-year time frame. So, but it is good news that the actual returns are exceeding the discount rate for now. This is a slide that summarizes historical citywide pension costs with the past several years, as well as projections for the next 6 years. And under projections, we're also going to include 2019, fiscal year 19, because it's not complete yet. So we do have to do some forecasting for that item. And the reason we talk about these is because these public pension costs were a matter not not too recent history of discourse in the media, in public forums, and a lot of action was taken by the state legislature, local bodies, including the city council here, as well as bargaining units to kind of get those under control. And the budget message discusses several of those avenues that the city council has taken to address this issue. So just to kind of give a quick summary of where we were and where we're headed, you see a decline in fiscal year 2012 to fiscal year 2015. And that decline resulted from the state legislature's approval of PEPRA, or the Public Employee Pension Reform Act of 2013. So ultimately what that did is it established a cap, and new members could no longer go into a tier 1, and they had to be in a tier 2 or a tier 3, which is more affordable to the city and other agencies. But then CalPERS realized, hey, wait, because our formula was based on a percentage of payroll once PEPRA was approved, as these people were leaving through attrition and going to agencies that pay better than the city of Clayton or retiring, they weren't collecting, and new people filled those positions that were in tier 2 or 3. They weren't collecting that money to chip away at the UALs. So then CalPERS said, you know what, we're going to go and implement a fixed dollar UAL billing that's not based on a percentage of payroll, and that's why you see a spike in fiscal year 2016 to basically recapture some of the losses that they incurred because of the law that went into effect, as well as how CalPERS implemented it. Then in fiscal year 2019, you see a dip, and that was positive for the city, and that was a direct result of the payoff of the public safety tier 1 side fund that we discussed previously, that we also said was non-recurring, because right here in fiscal year 20, we see it kind of normalizes back. And then in fiscal year 2021, it somewhat stabilizes, and that's because the tier 1 miscellaneous side fund is paid off, fully amortized as well, which is good news. But then we see projected growth here, which when you look at it as a percentage, I don't have those dollars, I don't have those figures here on the percentage year to year, but it basically reflects, inflation. So assumptions of 3 to 4%. So, with that being said, I would like to pass the matter back to the City Council for further discussion, any questions, and then to open the public hearing at the next meeting.
Great. Thank you very much. Very thorough. Any questions of staff?
I just don't know why people didn't show up to hear that presentation. That was great.
Long, sorry.
Did CalPERS officially change their discount rate, or how often does that happen?
They did change it. So it used to be 7.5%, and then I want to say in 2016, the board did approve a decrease from 7.5% to 7%.
So it went the wrong way.
was smoothed over a 3-year time frame. So then, starting fiscal year 2020, it's going to be 7% going forward. And the reason they did that is because CalPERS has published, they're just like City of Clayton, they're a public agency with an elected board, very transparent. Their website has a plethora of information on all of this, and they do have reports that talk about why they did that. And a lot of reasons were because I'll use the term back in the day, you used to be able to get a good return in very low risk fixed income securities, certificates of deposit, federal treasury notes, T-bills. You just can't get those yields anymore on something that's so conservative. So they said, we're going to reel that back a little bit to 7%. And what that did is ultimately, if you're not collecting it from the market, you got to collect it somewhere else. And you have to collect it from either the employees or the employer. And they're collecting it from both of those to get that difference.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Remind me again, in the capital improvement program, where are the vehicles in there?
The vehicles are actually not in the
They're not in the
capital improvement program.
They're not.
They're tracked in the CERF, so the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund, which is an internal.
Even
service
though
fund.
they are a capital item.
Yeah, what we track in the CIP are usually project-based, much larger for like streets projects or sewer projects and things. The HVAC replacement, which we had recently, and then the CERF, which is fund number 502. Don't ask me why I know that. And that's where we track the replacement of city vehicles, which is usually one public safety pursuit vehicle and maintenance, maybe a replacement of one of their fleet.
Thank you.
There's a bunch of vehicles in there this time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me open up for public comment. I don't have any speaker cards, but if anybody would like to address the council, come on up. Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and I think we are looking to see if any of the council members have any modification requests or recommendations of the budget. If there's none, then I'm looking for a motion to set the date.
Moved.
So it's been moved.
Second.
And it's been seconded. All those in favor of setting the date for Tuesday, June 4th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in this location. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing
That's
none.
the date for the public hearing.
That is the days for the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2019-20 city budget. And that passes unanimously, and thank you, Mr. Mizuno. We'll let you go home now.
Thank you very much. And the good news is the public hearing was June 4th and the due date was June 2nd. So that's out of the way
So
now.
we're
So
good.
I'm available to attend that. So that's good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Absolutely.
Got some sleep. So we'll move on then to item 8B, which is the consideration of the second reading and adoption of a city-initiated ordinance number 487 to amend the Clayton Municipal Code, Title 12, Streets and Sidewalks, to add Chapter 12.05 regarding the wireless facilities in public right-of-way. And I believe this is our second reading, but Mr. Waltering, do we have any additional staff presentation?
Yes, Madam Mayor and council members, there is a presentation for this item. At your May 7th regular meeting, council adopted an urgency ordinance and a resolution and approved introduction and first reading of this ordinance that's before you tonight, which places regulatory requirements including permit application, design, and development standards, as well as operational standards for installing wireless facilities in the city's public rights-of-way. This action was important and urgent because the FCC had adopted a regulatory order that went into effect earlier this year that relaxes standards and gives more authority to telecommunication carriers to install their wireless facilities in public rights-of-way throughout the country. Local jurisdictions, however, do retain some regulatory discretion in certain areas, including in the area of design and development standards with objective standards. At this time, the telecommunications industry is in the process of deploying its next generation of wireless technology, 5G, a more distributed small cell wireless network which relies heavily on using public rights-of-way for installation of these facilities. This 5G network is to deliver significantly more capacity than current 4G wireless technology. The capacity is needed to support the significant increases in the use of video and live streaming. The ordinances and resolution will provide the regulatory framework and design and development standards to process applications that may be submitted for wireless facilities in Clayton's public rights-of-way. The adopted package will require carriers to obtain a wireless encroachment permit from the City of Clayton to install wireless facilities in the city's public rights-of-way. Verizon Wireless was represented at the May 7th City Council meeting. The firm's representative requested certain modifications to the package, as was stated also in an accompanying letter from the law firm representing the wireless firm, Verizon. The city attorney and myself indicated the comments from Verizon Wireless representatives did not require modifications to the package presented at that council meeting. Staff did indicate, however, it would follow up with Verizon Wireless and its representatives and consider refinements to the package in the future as deemed appropriate and necessary. Since your last meeting, since May 7th, staff has initiated a conference call, and it occurred on May 16th with members of the Verizon team. From the city attorney's office, Andrew McCardle, myself, and your city engineer, Scott Allman, were on the call. We had discussions with representatives from Verizon and have decided to continue the dialogue, and we're looking at having a meeting perhaps here at City Hall over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We provided a couple of dates to continue discussions. At this point, in terms of the ordinance that's before you, we hold our position as stated before that we believe that the ordinance as submitted can go forward for second reading and adoption. Since your last meeting, we Also did receive a letter, an email from Councilmember Juan with a number of questions. The City Attorney's Office has provided detailed responses to those questions pertaining to this item that's attached to your agenda report. In addition, at the last meeting on May 7th, council members indicated a desire to see what some of the wireless facilities may look like in our public rights of way. Attached to your agenda report, we provided some samples of what those facilities may look like. At this point, I would like to go forward and recommend that the City Council move to have ordinance number 487 be read by title and number only, and then by separate motion approve the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 487 to amend the Clayton Municipal Code Title 12, Streets and Sidewalks, to add Chapter 12.05, Wireless Facilities in the Public Rights of Way, with the finding the adoption of this ordinance is not subject to the California Environmental Quality Act because CEQA only applies to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment, and this activity does not result in a potentially significant impact. We are continuing to work on this package in terms of working with the City Attorney's Office and City Engineer in terms of preparing a municipal facilities license agreement for use of our public facilities, Clayton's facilities, in the public right-of-way with carriers, and we are developing an application form. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have or any clarifications of my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, I did actually have a question, and I'm trying to find it and not finding it quickly because I didn't think about it until I was on the way down here. Looking at the number of wood poles that we have in town that are power poles largely, are those ones that would all have to be replaced with a metal pole if they wanted to put something on them?
Potentially, and as you...
Because our whole neighborhood is all wood poles.
Yes, potentially, but as you see in the materials that have been provided to you, that the city engineer does have the discretion in evaluating the applications to modify from that requirement. So it's desired to move away from the wood poles, sure, but there is the opportunity to retain the wood pole, and that would be up to the city engineer as stated in the materials.
Okay, because some of our older neighborhoods do still have wood poles, traditional wood power poles, some of which have been replaced not that long ago as they get as they need to. And it appears to me, and I'm trying to guess scale from these photos, but it appears to me that some of these attachments don't appear to be much larger than, say, a transformer on some of the existing power poles. Some of the representations we've had over the last few years would be that they were as large as a medium-sized refrigerator. But the photos here, if they are more representative, appear to me to look like they're about the size of the transformer that's right at the property line by my house, proportionately, and so it would be something similar to that? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Otherwise, it's a streamlined extension up of the pole, so that it just looks like it's a taller pole with the light pole either down below it or up on top.
That is correct. The intent would be to encourage the pole top mounted shrouded facilities, and that they not be taller than 72 inches in height and 14.5 inches in diameter.
Okay, but they would require the height of the light on a street light pole to remain at the same height as it is legally now, correct?
That is correct. The height is 30 feet or could be 30 feet. There could be an antenna facility mounted on top of that, though, up to 72 inches in height, 14.5 inches in diameter.
Okay. And most of those poles are close to a foot in diameter already.
Yes.
Okay. That gives us a better scale of what we're looking at. Thank you.
Councilmember Diaz.
Power. How are they powered? Are they going to have to run cables from the base of the pole, or are they going to receive power by solar?
They will need power, and so there will need to be a local power source.
Defined as?
Defined as in the public right-of-way.
Yes.
And there would be some trenching involved to provide the power source for the facility.
Okay, so that sounds like there may be more than a modest amount of trenching, particularly in the areas where these older wooden poles are. Correct?
Potentially. Again, as they look at siting the facilities, they're going to be looking at where is there a local power source that they can go to. So there are many different factors that they'll consider. Where's a local power source? The criteria in the design and development standards talk about discouraging in certain areas, say, for example, discouraging in front of single-family homes. So they would be looking for locations that meet the criteria in the local ordinance, and including looking for a power source.
Okay, has Verizon provided any estimate on the number of these, for lack of a better, a transmitting and receiving device, how many they'd have to put in our city?
It's a question that we've asked them. We had a meeting, as I indicated, on May 16th, and one of the questions we had for them was to give us, so that we could give you, a better idea of the network that would be required in order to provide service to the city of Clayton. What are we talking about in terms of distribution and frequency? What they've offered back to us is that we are in the process of scheduling a follow-up meeting. We've given them 2 dates over the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
And the intent is for them to bring a couple of their RF, radio frequency specialists, and that they would share with us some of that information. And at that point, we would be able to respond to your question. We had the same question.
Because what I'm looking for, not only how you're going to get the power there, but what kind of a disruption factor when you talk about trenching. What is that going to create, and how long would it last? If I could just see them spending their sweet time on doing this, other than trying to focus on it and get it done quickly.
I think one of the things that we try to do in drafting the ordinance and design guidelines, design and development standards, is to, as they're talking shot clock, we try to provide timelines for them to initiate construction, complete construction. So, for example, they need to commence construction within 90 days of receiving their permit and finish 30 days thereafter. There are also conditions in the materials that talk about the fact that they need to do their work in a manner that results in the least amount possible of disruption to the public right-of-way and its use by the citizens of Clayton. So the city engineer is the primary person involved in the evaluation of the applications, but other staff members will be involved as well. So things like short time frames for construction periods, like evaluating what location would result in the least disruption, including source of power to the community. So those are things that would be evaluated, and that kind of information would be part of the application process that would be submitted and evaluated by our staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Juan?
Yes. It looks like when we had our correspondence, the majority of the requests that I had asked for got incorporated into the document. I don't think that anything wasn't. If I'm trying to do a compare, is there a red line available?
There's not a red line. I went through it, though, fairly carefully. In fact, I think very carefully. I think that the issues that you brought up in your letter have been addressed. As we indicated, I think we were in general agreement with you, and I should say the City Attorney's Office, our staff as well, with you. In many cases, the language of our document indicates encourage, discourage, and provides discretion to the city engineer in his capacity as the primary evaluator of the applications. So I think that the issues you raised were generally addressed, if not across the board addressed. I would say that there were a couple of items that came to mind. One was the braided materials in terms of us prohibiting, as you may recall,
the strand-mounted facilities.
Exactly, in the design guidelines. And what I would expect is that with our continued discussions with Verizon representatives, others that may come forward as well, but right now we're in discussions with Verizon, that there are a small number at this point, I believe, of issues that we would continue to discuss with them, and perhaps look at modifications to the design guidelines after we have a better understanding of what the implications might be. And I think in your materials and our back and forth with them, we looked at some options in terms of how to handle the braided facilities, braided wires. And I would assume that in the future, after further discussions with their team, we probably would come back to the council and perhaps suggest certain minor modifications to the design and development standards.
Were there any changes made to the design standards that were presented at our last meeting? Because they're not included in the materials this time. So
There were no changes. There were no changes to the design and development standards, and there were no changes other than the couple of modifications that you requested at the last meeting to the ordinance itself. So we are moving forward with the ordinance as presented to you last time with a couple of minor modifications. I think one had to do with the fact that the idea was that in terms of completeness, we must or shall provide written information back.
Yeah, I saw that. That was in there.
Yeah, that was in there.
So we're talking about just the ordinance, the second reading of the ordinance, but it's not, this doesn't speak to the design standards at all, which was done by resolution. So that's a completely separate.
That is correct. The resolution you acted on at your last meeting, so it's only the ordinance at this meeting.
Great. Councilmember Wolf.
Just quickly, I've had a couple of concerned citizens emailing me since the last presentation with regard to the RF exposure compliance, feeling that the FCC guidelines are not strict enough. So in your talks with Verizon or anyone else, I would ask that you would help to get a presentation together or get something together that would belay the concerns of the public with regard to safety and on RF exposure.
From our perspective, we are very sensitive to that issue, and we're looking at the FCC thresholds and standards, and that's what we have to work with as local agencies at this time. Our job is to make sure that in terms of our process, that the adopted FCC standards are met and not exceeded. So as you recall from our last discussion and the materials, the idea is that as part of the application process, there would be an RF study, radio frequency study submitted with the application. It would be peer reviewed at the applicant's expense by a qualified third-party professional. And then to make sure that the intent is to meet standards. And then once the facility is installed and operational, base operational, there would be a test in the field. That peer review consultant would go back out in the field to make sure that the facility in an operation mode meets standards. So that's what we can do. That's what we've put in the materials that are before you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I have one final observation. And in addition to power, there's going to be a need to connect connect those devices to some central switching or processing point, because that's how you get on the network and talk to everybody. So I guess, having been an engineer at one time on the early development of cellular telephone systems, it would be interesting to make sure that they don't have to string wires somehow to get back to that central switching point in order to make everything work, or they have some sort of a microwavable or transmitting facility there from that unit to some central point. I just point that out. That's a consideration that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me open up for public comment. I don't have any speaker cards, but if anyone would like to address the council, please come up. Wait for the, yeah.
I'm sorry. My name is Janice Hester, and I live at 7 Mount Eden, and I have a property in Shell Circle. My question is, are we talking about PG&E's utility poles, or are we talking about the city's light poles? Which one are you discussing here?
Do you have
Because
any?
PG&E has their utility poles. Any pole attachment has to go through their engineering with approval from PG&E because they own and maintain. The first one is your high kV, second is your secondary. Any pole attachment goes below that. So how are you putting, if it's a PG&E utility pole, and they're called utility poles, how are you putting this receiver transmitter at the very top with the high kV? So my question to you is, in reference, are you talking about, which is mostly in Clayton underground anyway, and you said you had some wooden poles, is that for light poles or utility for your utilities?
Power poles.
Power. They're considered, with PG&E, they're considered utility poles. Okay. And you have your attachments. And my deceased husband was an engineer who did all pole attachments out of Concord Distribution. That was over 10 years ago. I'm not current, but I do believe the city has to go through with Verizon for pole attachment with PG&E. Is that correct?
Hold on, is that your comment?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
asking the question. Is that
Perfect.
correct?
Yeah, perfect. So let me ask, Mr. Waltering, can you address that?
So through the mayor, the ordinance really applies to use of the public right-of-way. So it would be both city facilities and other facilities that would not necessarily be owned by the city, but would be in the public right-of-way. And the design guidelines would apply to both. The carriers would need to work through the entities that own the facilities in the public right-of-way. So they would be working with us in terms of an agreement, a municipal license agreement for use of our facilities, like light poles owned by the city, let's say, within the public right-of-way. They would be working with other agencies, utilities, for poles that are not owned by the city, but in the public right-of-way. But in both cases, they would need to comply with the design guidelines and development standards.
Great, and thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Ms. Stanaway?
I just want to make one observation with regard to Jeff Wan's comments about being able to discover what actual modifications were made to the document that was given by Mr. Wan and the document that Mr. Wolfring was referring to. If we get a electronic copy of everything that comes to the City Council, and that electronic copy is submitted in searchable PDF format, then that searchable format will be easily searched by keyword, so that then you wouldn't have to ask whether something is being modified or not. You would be able to go and find your searchable word, and then you could see exactly what's being modified and what hasn't been. So you don't need actual redlined documents. Okay?
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? Go ahead. And please state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Mark Elson. I was just curious, the FCC sets the radio frequency energy level, so a local jurisdiction can't do anything more strict than that. Is that right? Okay, so it's really, other than just determining where these things are going to go and what they're going to look like, we don't really have too much say over it. Is that okay? I just wanted to.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. And unless there are any comments, I think we're looking for a couple motions, starting with the...
I appreciate you making the changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I would move to have the city clerk read ordinance number 487 by title and number only and waive further reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously.
Ordinance number 487, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Clayton to amend the Clayton Municipal Code Title 12, Streets and Sidewalks, to add Chapter 12.05, Wireless Facilities and Public Rights of Way.
I would move to adopt ordinance number 487 with the finding that the enactment of this ordinance is not subject to the California Environmental Quality Act because CEQA only applies to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment, and this activity is not considered to be a project and can be seen with certainty that it will not have a significant effect or physical change to the environment.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that also passes unanimously. That moves us into item 8C, which is the consideration of the adoption of amendments to the City Council guidelines and procedures to add a new policy prohibiting City Council members or planning commissioners use of or receipt of digital or electronic communications to and from the public related to items on the respective agenda during a City Council or Planning Commission meeting. And I believe we have City Attorney report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. At your last meeting, as a request from Councilmember Diaz, you discussed creating a policy for council members to receive communications from the public at the dais during discussions on agendized items. You requested that I bring back an update to the City Council guidelines and procedures to prohibit the use or receipt of digital or electronic communications from the public related to items on the council agenda. I have highlighted that addition to the guidelines at section I.20. In addition, you requested that prohibition also apply to planning commissioners. That has also been added as N-6, which is highlighted in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Are there any questions from our city attorney? Seeing none, I do have one speaker card, so I'll open up public comment. Mr. Budell.
I'm just going to keep it brief. I don't know what analysis the city attorney did, but this is absolutely an infringement on freedom of speech, which, as a lawyer, you should know is subject to strict scrutiny. As I understand it, the prohibition would be that council members can go on the internet and look up things, but can't receive a message from the public. That's absolutely restricting the public's right to communicate with a city council member. So for a city that's very worried about getting sued by entities like the ACLU, I think you might want to think this one through.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. And just for clarification, what we're trying to do is not to prohibit the public from contacting the council members. I think we all want our citizens to contact us. I think what we're trying to do is to promote transparency so that anything and everything the five of us do here during a hearing, during an agenda item, is visible to every single citizen, so that we're not having private communications on agenda items, which is not in line of transparency. Any comments on the proposed
I'd ask the city attorney.
Oh, I was just going to comment, and Mayor Catalano, to add to that, members of the public obviously can contact you in advance of a meeting. They have the ability to speak to the council during public comment on any item that is not agendized, and of course they have the ability to speak to you on any agendized item. So the members of the public have many opportunities to address the council.
Great, thank you. Any comments on the proposed language? Are we all in agreement? So do we need a motion on that? Yes, we do.
I would move to amend the council guidelines and procedures to incorporate the new policy prohibiting the use of or receipt of digital or electronic communications to and from the public related to items on the respective agenda during the city council or planning commission meeting.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Go
But
ahead.
I will make a comment.
Go ahead. So
And the
seeing none, that
comment
does pass
really is
unanimously.
based on the ethics that we are required to abide by that are put in place by the Fair Political Practices Commission. And those require us to be open and transparent about all communication we receive during a council meeting. And so this is an effort to make sure that anyone in the meeting room or on TV knows what information we are receiving during the actual council meeting. It must be transparent. So that's the intent, that there are fines that can be imposed by the FPPC if you don't comply.
Great. So that moves us into item number 9, which is council items regarding future requests and directives for future meetings. I'd like to actually ask one item. I think all of us were contacted by a citizen asking about EV chargers. And I know as a city, I think it was last year, we actually approved an ordinance that allowed for EV chargers to be included in streetscaping, but I don't know that we don't have any in our downtown. So I would love to actually have a little bit more information as to what it would cost. And I think there are a couple different types of EV chargers, and I don't know if it would be cost prohibitive, but at least I would have to have a discussion and see what the cost is. And
I would add to that to ask staff to contact the Transpac TDM folks through the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. There are sources of funding to us locally to do that. And so, but there may be infrastructure costs that go above and beyond the actual equipment. So we might see what those guidelines might be, and we might be able to put together a pamphlet or something like that to let people know how to go about requesting them.
And just for clarification, Mayor, we could bring back this item as an information item and give you the materials and the background that you're looking for.
that would be great, yeah, just so we can have a further discussion of whether it's something.
Our
within-
CCTA staff would probably be happy to make a presentation too, so you don't have to learn it all from scratch.
Any other requests?
I'd actually like to follow up on the idea that the state is looking to ban glyphosate and what that all entails.
So further information. as
So
to
further
what's
information
pending
about what is their proposal, what's coming down the pipe, I'd like to know that.
We'll have to research that. And Mr. Bedell said you had maybe some materials you could email us.
Yeah, like I said, I get these little notifications thing, and I'll follow. I'm happy to follow to forward.
And it may be that I understood from the mayor's conference that something was going on in Concord. They were trying to ban something. No, all right.
I think a lot of cities
I was
and states
completely
have-
mistaken.
A lot of cities and states, both cities within California, states outside of California, have discussed the issue. I think several have moved forward and essentially done that.
Okay, any other future items? Seeing none, we move on to closed session. We have none, which means we are adjourned until June 4th, 2019. And I will pass the gavel. We are now going to...
So we're going to call to order the Oakhurst Geological Hazard Abatement District for May 21st, 2019. Do we need to do the pledge? No.
No.
No. Okay. Public comments. We're going to open public comments. Anything that's not on the agenda. Can anybody have a public comment? Yes, sir. Come on up.
It's on 5A.
Is this for the actual report?
This is for the jihad plan. It's a recommendation that a request that I'm making.
This is anything that's not on the agenda?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
No, that's on the
I'm
agenda.
Joe Beatty again.
On item 5A.
That comes a little bit later.
Okay.
This is
I thought it was-
general, non-agenda.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wait till the agenda item.
Oh, okay, I thought.
2 minutes.
This was on the agenda. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, so We're closing public comments. All right. Okay, the consent calendar.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? None? Okay, that passes. Okay, opening to public hearings, we have none. The action item 5A, presentation and consideration of a resolution to approve the proposed Oakhurst Geological Hazard Abatement District budget fiscal year 2019-2020. Okay.
Recognize
The district manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The very short presentation, the pertinent part of establishing this assessment budget is the fact that it's based on a budget that was established in 2000, the year 2000, when the residents of the Oakhurst Geological Hazard, or Oakhurst area, voted to establish the Hazard Abatement District and establish the initial budget that was proposed for the district. That budget is, and built into that is a consumer price index adjustment on an annual basis. And so every year that proposed budget is adjusted by that consumer price index. As the finance manager mentioned earlier in the city council meeting, this year's adjustment from May of 2018 till April of 2019 is 4.01%. And that is the amount that the 2018-19 budget was adjusted to bring it into the current fiscal year 2019-20. The basis of the budget remains exactly the same. The line items remain exactly the same. The assessment process is done exactly the same. I'm happy to answer questions or describe that for you if that's requested. But in essence, if you I don't want to belabor the report any longer than necessary. So,
okay,
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for staff? No? Now we open the questions to the public. Mr. Beatty, we have your card.
Yes, thank you. Just a question. In fact, it's apropos to the assessment. Prop 218 requires that all payers of special tax assessments must have a direct benefit. It's clearly stated. And the GHAD benefits primarily Key Lock Way, and I think there's some areas in Peacock Creek possibly. The house on the end of Key Lock Way has been abandoned or unoccupied for many, many years because of subsidence. And there were abatement efforts put in 10 years ago, more than that, to drill dewatering holes and tunnels into the side of the hill, inject grout, install inclinometers and piezometers, and those are read every year by an engineering firm, and a report is issued. And there are no other abatement, as far as I know, never have been. There are no abatement and no monitoring efforts, no money being spent for any areas on Keller Ridge, any of those areas that I'm aware of. And I've got all the minutes for the old meetings way back to 1999. So, and normally this comes up every year at the assessment period, normally in September, October, whenever the assessments are done. And on my street, we have 17 houses, and I know the neighbors get together once in a while, and we talk about our taxes and assessments. And we are unable to see any benefits to anybody on our street. And there are roughly 1,484, about 1,500 property owners in Oakhurst. So if you count the number of property owners on Key Lock Way that get a direct benefit, it's pretty small. I would think probably less than 100. And if you compare that to the total 1,500 property owners in Oakhurst as a whole, that's pretty small. And the way you determine this is levy codes, and I got this from the county tax assessor. I asked him, I sent an email to him last year to ask how many people were paying the jihad assessment, and the number came back around 1,484. And the total, and you know better than I would, but I think the normal budget per year is around 39,000, 38, 39, 40,000 per year that's gained from that assessment. But if we don't see any benefit, And if that doesn't comply with Prop 218, then I think the tax assessment comes into question. So what I would like to see, it's a very simple suggestion, and I submitted this last year, is that in the jihad plan, there is an explanation of benefit to all property owners not on Key Lock Way or any of the areas where monitoring and abatement is done. We don't see any. There may well be some that we don't have visibility of. But I think it's fair to ask for in the jihad plan a simple statement of how other people, not property owners, not in those areas, benefit in compliance with Prop 218. So that's my suggestion, recommendation that they do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Now's your chance. Okay, seeing no more, we'll close the public comments, bring it back to the Board of Directors. Any questions, comments, discussion? Okay.
I actually had one on the report. I'm trying to pull it up here. On the Key Lock Way section, it talks about excessive deformation, ground movement, and an additional inclinometer. Am I pronouncing it? Inclinometer? But that's not going to be spent because of the repairs necessary. Is there an expectation of timeline for how long that would take to accumulate the funds necessary to effect the repair?
Well, unfortunately, no, at the moment. We did have a plan that this spring we would replace one of the slope inclinometers. In the winter months that we've just weathered, no pun intended, we had a fairly significant depression develop in one of our streets that's in Oakhurst. And so that's going to require a significant amount of exploration to find out what the issue is and to be able to correct it. And I'm a little concerned, not a little, I'm significantly concerned that is going to eat into the budget that we had planned to use for the slope inclinometer. And so if that is the case, I mean, we could be another 2, 3, 4 years gathering and saving funds to be able to get to the first inclinometer, and then there's a second one after that that we would like to or need to replace, and that would be just that much further out into the future. But until I know what the magnitude of this street issue is, I really can't put a dollar amount to it and know what the impact is going to be to to the potential of replacing the inclinometer.
Okay. Can you, the gentleman's comments about the direct benefit regarding Prop 218, can you, Ms. Silvermarian, could you comment on that, if that's in how accurate?
I can actually comment on it. Mr. Beatty's been here every year. He's a regular attendee for Mr. Beatty's a regular attendee on this. And as was last year stated and is indicated in the report, I think some of the confusion is the money that's being levied and assessed for the jihad goes to maintenance of public or jihad-owned parcels and property improvements. So that's the streets and some of the other assets that the public owns. We, the city, own, the jihad district owns, not the private property owners. So even though there's maybe 17 homes or whatever the amount are on Keller Ridge Drive, we still have a responsibility to ensure the integrity related to land movement under the streets, as was just mentioned about Awani and Miwok from the city engineer, where there's deformation occurring, and we need to go investigate that because there's a storm drain line right in that area as well. And so that's taking precedent in his recommendation to direct funds there to further investigate and determine what's going on there versus putting in a slope measurement monitor on Key Lock. But the assessment is only for the maintenance of the jihad-owned parcels in the district and those improvements, not for private property areas. So the fact that he says he's on Keller Ridge Drive and they haven't seen anything, there could be anything at any other time that might be an impact related to earth movement on the public properties that we would have to address.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I would move adoption of the resolution approving the district's budget for fiscal year 2019-2020, with which action includes setting July 16th, 2019 as the public hearing date on the proposed jihad real property tax assessments for fiscal year 1920. And I would like to ask the city engineer, maybe by that time, to bring back a little more specific list of what some of the things are we use the dollars for maintenance, the V-ditches, some of those other things that we do every year with the minimal dollars that we have.
Second. Could you also, piggybacking onto that, I think a map of where some of the items are would be really
That would be
useful.
great. That would be great.
Beneficial. We've had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, that passes unanimously. Now, looks like we have board items. Anybody want anything for the next meeting? Yes, Mr. Diaz? No? Okay. All right, so that's it. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.